2016 was a year that certainly had its ups and downs for me. Bad because of some unfortunate things that happened, but good because I went on some great vacations and I got my hands on some pretty awesome games. So it's time for my next yearly countdown of the games I played in certain years, except this time it'll only be a top 10. Why only 10? Because I haven't played as many games in 2016 that I can hold as close to my heart as much as the amount of games I've played in some other years. Probably because they remind me of some of the hardships I had to endure last year. Of course, the one per franchise rule will be around this time, so it'll probably be harder to come up with an order to these games. If you want to know the full order of every game I played in 2016, check the description box. Let's get on with the show. Freedom Planet was a game that kinda needed to be made, and kind of didn't. It's meant to reminisce the classic Sonic games, but if you ask me, I thought Sonic never left us. Despite that, I get a lot of enjoyment from Freedom Planet. Just like the Sonic games, it has amazing and imaginative level backgrounds and very catchy music. Though you aren't as fast as Sonic, boosting will help with this. Plus, there are cutscenes giving you an actual story, and voice acting! Seeing this happen in what looks like a 16-bit game is outstanding. Even if it was made with Wii U capabilities, it still feels great doing this. Another thing I appreciate is how they even give warning signs if something super dangerous is around. However, that being said, there are two major problems with this adventure. First off, it's extremely cheap at times. Second off, because the villain's just plain contrived. He's supposedly a villain who wants to avenge his planet, but he also has a sick desire for destruction. You can't have both of those at the same time. Still, great game nonetheless, especially for the only game I had played last year that got me into a new franchise. As the sequel to Pac-Man World, Pac-Man World 2 manages to be good, just like the first. The environments in it are definitely a lot prettier than they were in the first game. That's not to say the environments in the first were bad, but the environments here look better for me. Also, you can actually move north this time instead of spending most of the time going east. That's certainly an improvement. Speaking of improvements, there isn't the monotonous quest you have to do to unlock the final boss this time. A nice touch is how now, the majority of the bosses are against the Pac-Man ghosts fought in different mechs. Seeing these guys as bosses is something I'm definitely down for. What's not to love about Pac-Man World 2? Other than a few cheap instances, and a horrible camera angle, I enjoy it a whole lot, and it might even be better than the first game.
Round one.
After years of being delayed, Shantae Half-Genie Hero finally came out. Is it good enough to be a Shantae game? Well, barely. The cartoon style to Half-Genie Hero does work in its favor. Plus, transformations are back. Like I said in the past, I prefer the pirate gear from Pirate's Curse over the transformations. But now it doesn't take nearly as much time to transform as it did in the first two Shantae games. Not only does it bring back the Harpy and Spider, but you have 6 all-new transformations. The crab lets you travel on the ocean floor, the bat lets you fly sideways through small gaps and see in the dark for a bit, the mouse which lets you go through these tiny mazes and have a lot of fun, and a few others. The lighting in Half-Genie Hero also works very well, and highlights certain areas. The voice that says, "The story insert certain boss's name here," is also a cute touch as well. But if there are some problems with it, it's that the dungeons are surprisingly gone here, even though they were so much fun in the past games. The presentation also feels way too basic, but you should still give this a try if you're a Shantae fan.
Incredible!
Star Fox Zero, one of everyone's most hated games of 2016, and I can without a doubt see why. It wasn't the grand return to the formula everyone was looking for, and instead just a retelling of the original story. Seriously guys, can't you create a new Star Fox game without making it have the same story? However, I still find some good in it. They got a lot of original voice actors back, the scenery is actually kinda cool, and it does feel like a true Star Fox game. You also have more control over where you want to go whenever you're in the R-Wing walker mode, even though the walker does look kinda weird. And even though the gyro wing has somewhat sloppy controls, they're not so bad once you get used to them. Also, it's actually kind of fun deploying Direct Eye and having him hack enemy computers to deactivate locks that actually leaves me with a feeling of satisfaction. Even though it's not exactly the best game that came out in 2016, it's a very fun game in my book. Ladies and gentlemen, I have found my guilty pleasure.
Get up and you're golden.
If you've seen some of my past countdowns, you'd know that I didn't like the first Crash Bandicoot all that much. That makes me sad considering how much I wanted to love that game. because of how much I loved Wrath of Cortex and CTR as a kid. I still decided to give Crash 2 Cortex Strikes Back a chance. I have no regrets about it. If you remember why I didn't like the first, you'd know that I'd be more than pleased about the save feature being fixed. Instead of making it so you can only save if you get the 3 Tawna tokens, now there's a load save screen that lets you save your progress the right way. When you combine that with the memorable formula of Crash Bandicoot games, that makes this an overall fun adventure. Just how addicting it is to get all the gems and crystals will guarantee that you will be held over for a good amount of time. It's fun using warp points in some levels to transport to the secret areas of other levels. I wish they would have given you more indication of what level you need to come out in order to get to certain crates. Also, even though story doesn't matter as much in Crash games as it does in, like, say, Zelda or Final Fantasy, it still bugs me. Here I will give away spoilers, but it will probably be obvious spoilers. Honestly, the end plot twist was kinda predictable, considering how they foreshadow it too much. If that isn't enough for you, just look at the game's title. Nevertheless, while it fails in the story department, the gameplay does not disappoint. Last year, I actually got 4 Mario Party games, because I wanted to have played every Mario game that interests me by October in case a moment from one of them was disturbing enough to make my disturbing Mario moments list, even though none of them made it. Anyways, Mario Party 9 is quite possibly my favorite Mario Party game. I appreciate the way it changes up the Mario Party formula to make it feel fresh and new. Reason I prefer it over Mario Party 10 is because it doesn't have the annoying Bowser lock system. Instead of boards you run around repeatedly, you have a whole level to go through and all 4 of the players are in one vehicle. I'd be mad at this, except the penalties and rewards usually happen to the driver. Am I the only one who prefers getting mini stars instead of gathering up coins to trade them for stars? Because they look nicer, and also because in other Mario Party games, if you get a lot of coins in one board, it wouldn't matter if you couldn't get to the star, so I find these to be better rewards. The environments are some of the most gorgeous in a Mario Party game. Also, boss fights. These aren't special for a Mario Party game since we've seen them, but these are very addicting. Especially since all 4 players work together to defeat the boss, and whoever gets the most hits on it gets more stars, with a bonus going to whoever gets the last hit on the boss. But just like all Mario Party games, some games can be cheap. Seriously, how is anyone supposed to count all those Goombas? Even still, I love this game, and I bet you can see why it's my favorite in the Mario Party series.
Round 2.
Even though I love Kirby Triple Deluxe, I still thought Kirby Planet Robobot was a much better game. Why exactly? Well, for starters, I had much more fun with the Robobot suits than I did with the Hypernova, especially since it didn't have a certain disgusting scene with an eel. They also changed with each ability being used. They're not used with every single ability in Planet Robobot, but the ones it has, brilliant. The race car with the wheel ability, shooting musical shockwaves with the mic, actually making an umbrella look epic, and so on. As someone who hates robot suit segments, these are awesome. But even without the robot suits, the abilities are still superb in my eyes. The new ones include Doctor, which is actually more fun than it sounds, PSI, which is a very nice shout out to Earthbound, and my favorite of the 3, Poison, which does wicked close range damage and creates a poison cloud that sticks around for a small second to chip away at the enemy's health for a small bit. They also made the level designs more mechanical to help with the mood, while still feeling like a Kirby game. Is this not an amazing game? It's cut out for people who like both Kirby and mechanical stuff. Final Fantasy VII, the game that's got split reactions in the video game community. Some love it, some hate it. On one hand, the graphics have aged really badly. At first, I didn't understand why people were saying graphics aren't enough to hate a game, and yet saying they're enough to ruin Final Fantasy VII. But then I saw why. Because they make it really hard to see where you can and can't walk. This can be a big problem throughout the course of the adventure. The opening level is also completely dull and gray. On the other hand, the music is gorgeous, as you'd think a Final Fantasy game's music would be. I also remember the days where I, as well as the rest of the Countdown community, liked to make fun of Sephiroth for being an overglorified mama's boy. Well, now, after playing the game, Sephiroth's actually a pretty cool villain. Just not as good as Kefka. Not gonna tell you why, because that would contain spoilers from Final Fantasy VI. There's also a huge variety for how many environments the game has. It feels like somewhat of a change of pace. The limit gauge was also nice to introduce, since it lets you launch even stronger attacks every so often. While it lacks in gameplay, everything else is a joy to do. I can see why it brought RPGs back to the mainstream market. Game Freak, thank you so much for bringing in Generation 7 of Pokemon. The ideas and the things that set apart from the previous 6 generations help it. I love how it pokes fun of the classic Pokemon cliches without wiping its butt on them. Take notes, Shrek. With having ride pages instead of needing an HM slave, thereby making your life much easier, making Alola take place on 4 separate islands, and even the gyms have been replaced with Alolan trials. They still compensate for gyms, and Game Freak finally decided to give us a Dark-type one. Admittedly, some of the puzzles have basically the same challenges of just facing a bunch of Pokemon instead of solving puzzles, but the totem battles can get really intense. And I think they're some of the most challenging Pokemon we've had in the past 5 years if you aren't over-leveled. But I wasn't very big on Team Skull. I can forgive the fact that they aren't as threatening as the previous enemy teams since they're meant to be a satire, but I still find them a bit annoying, especially those stupid body movements they make. Though at least their leader, Guzma, is a neat villain, and the other main antagonist is even more awesome, and possibly my favorite antagonist in the franchise, but I'm not going to spoil who it is. The new Alola forms are good too, since these Pokemon are so much different from their normal forms, making them seem fresh and new despite having the same name. I also think the Z moves are just plain awesome to look at. Combine that with lovable characters and a beautiful storyline, and you have a formula for greatness. But why did they feel the need to kill off so many unique typings? What was Game Freak on when they did this? I'm just surprised that Claydol and Toxicroak's typings are so unique. The frame rate can be really bad at times in the double battles, and whose stupid idea was it for them to have some Pokemon call for backup? Well, I won't let that ruin my enjoyment of this generation. Before we get to number 1, here are some honorable mentions. First up, Paper Mario Color Splash, a game that's definitely improved on the story department, and it could have had a chance if it weren't for the horribly bad Kamek and Shy Bandit mechanics. Mario Party 7, a game with a very relaxing atmosphere, and it was really close to getting on the list. Main reason it wasn't on here was because I like Mario Party 9 a little bit more. Mario&Luigi Paper Jam. I think this is a much better game than Dream Team because I thought its core mechanics were stronger than Dream Team's core mechanics because it didn't get as dull as easily, and I didn't get sick of the game in the second half of it, though the annoying paper toad missions and uninspiring papercraft battles were still horrendous. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Man, I'm going to get a lot of haters for this, but my number 1 pick is Fire Emblem Fates. This would have to be one of the most underrated games I've ever played. Nearly everyone I know hates it, which is sad because to me this really is an amazing game. I'll admit, I do understand people being annoyed by how the writers did a poor job refining their characters, for making some characters act completely different in supports than they do in the main plot. However, I still enjoy the majority of these characters in spite of their faults. Awakening was already a fun game, but Fates flew right past it with flying colors. They brought in so many improvements, like the weapon durability meter. I hated the weapon durability meter, but now you can use weapons as many times as you want. You may have a limited amount of stabs, but I can live with that. And as for the main gimmick, there are 3 different pathways to choose. You can side with Hoshido in Birthright, you can stay with Nora in Conquest, or you can refuse to join a side. All 3 of them are extremely fun to play through. The level design is great once again thanks to the Dragon's Vein, which can change parts of the level. Some people hate the game because the characters have no personality. To that, I say, what the heck are you talking about? Do you even see how the characters act? It's not that hard if you're following the story. If anything, I felt more connected to the characters in Fates than I did in most video games I've played. Even more than with the ones in Awakening. I really did feel like the characters had put their trust in me, only to be disappointed by my choice. The soundtrack is also one of the best I've heard, topping every other game in the franchise. Even Path of Radiance and Sacred Stones would listen to this game's music with envy. Sorry, Sacred Stones, but Fire Emblem Fates is my new favorite game in the franchise, no matter what the haters say, and it deserves its spot at the top of my list. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this countdown, and I will see you in the next video.